And we're back now with our politics panel. Susan Page is USA Today's Washington bureau chief. Ben Domenech is the publisher of The Federalist. Amy Walter is national editor of the Cook Political Report. And Patrick Healy covers politics for the New York Times. All right, Susan Page, what's the real fallout of this disclosure from Friday, or do we know?
We don't know for sure. We'll know as more polling goes on, although only 9 days to the election. I think it does do a couple things. I think it helps Donald Trump consolidate support among Republicans who've been reluctant to support him. I think it makes it hard for Hillary Clinton to deliver some of the voters who were probably going to vote for her but weren't that enthusiastic. And it is a lifeline to Senate candidates like Pat Toomey and Kelly Ayotte and Marco Rubio, who have been in danger but now in a stronger position to make an argument that voters ought to reelect them.
Pat, what do you make of the Clinton response to this? It was not a pivot. It was to go right at Comey, and they're keeping it up, right?
Right. They're on a war footing, and that's what the last 9 days could be like. Look, they were really hoping that it was going to be Trump and fitness that they would be talking about the most. Now they have to deal with headlines of Clinton and FBI. That is not what they want. They have few targets, John. They can't go after really Huma Abedin and Anthony Weiner. They decided they can't throw her under the bus. Comey is really sort of who they had, but it creates such awkwardness. This is President Obama's FBI director. It gets back into Loretta Lynch and the Bill Clinton meeting, like you brought up. So whether they can move undecided voters in places like North Carolina and Florida when the last week is all that people are talking about, if Trump is able to sort of make that case, it's going to be a really big challenge for them.
And Ben, we see what the Governor Pence was doing, what Donald Trump is doing, which is using this as a magnet to attach all kinds of other things. The revelations this week about Bill Clinton and his foundation and using that to enrich himself. The general, as Donald Trump said, the general drama that surrounds the Clintons. And if there is this fight between the Clinton campaign and the director of the FBI, isn't that playing out the drama now right in front of voters as they're heading towards the election?
It is, and you know, certainly talking to a lot of Republicans, particularly in the Senate, to Susan Page's point this week, I was hearing that line from Die Hard over and over again. You ask for a miracle, I give you the FBI. But I think in this case, what it really does is to Susan's point, it forces a situation where the Clinton campaign had wanted to focus in these final days on trying to expand the map and trying to increase a potential likelihood of winning the Senate. I think it really prevents them from doing that. It gives a lot of momentum, I think, for Republicans and for people like Mike Pence to make the case, come back home. You know, you have to stop the Clinton machine. You don't want to relive the 90s scandals all over again. And I think that puts the Clinton campaign in a very difficult position. They're still the odds-on favorite to win, but they may be stumbling towards the end here.
The alternative argument, Amy, is that any Republican, if Donald Trump's having trouble with Republicans, any Republican who thinks they can't, and the number of times this week in talking to Republican strategists, the number of times they brought up that overheard video of Donald Trump talking about sexual abuse, that's the thing that's hurting Republicans getting to yes about Donald Trump. Is this really going to interrupt that, is the question? Is Hillary Clinton's problems going to help them get over their problems and worries about Donald Trump?
So there's been a remarkable consistency in the pattern of this race from the very beginning, which is when the spotlight is on one candidate, it benefits the other candidate. So when we're talking about Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton's polls numbers come up. When we talk about Hillary Clinton, his numbers get better. Hillary Clinton, of course, was doing great when we were focusing not just on the tape, but I would argue the real slide for Donald Trump began after the first debate and then when he got into the fight with the Miss Universe. And I think that really cemented where the focus was, which was about temperament. And I hear this over and over again from voters who are conflicted between, they have a choice between someone they don't trust and someone whose temperament they don't like, and that the temperament piece was becoming a bigger determinant. I don't know that this suddenly changes and they go, oh, you're right, it's trust. I'm going to go back to trust. I don't trust her and I'm going to vote for him. The temperament piece still seems a bigger challenge for Trump than the trust does for Hillary Clinton. The other question in my mind is whether or not that this focus on Comey is not just to try to, because I don't have anything else to do, but to try to help shore up their own flagging base, right? Have a bad guy, which is James Comey and the FBI, to get their base all fired up. See, they're trying to steal it from Hillary Clinton. The FBI's coming at the last minute. You got to get out and vote right now.
Yeah, they're all but saying the word rigged.
But the great irony of that situation, of course, is that in July there were all these headlines, all these editorial boards saying to Republicans that criticizing James Comey is undermining the rule of law, et cetera, et cetera. This time around, you know, the Clinton campaign has turned it around totally on him. I understand to the point point that Patrick made about the inability of them to find somebody else to point to. The real problem they have here is that Ms. Abadan testified in June that she had turned over all of the devices relevant to this. Initial reporting from the Washington Post this morning says that she was not aware that these emails were on this device. And it's one of these situations where they can't find someone else. They have to have Comey as the fall.
And there's such awkwardness within the campaign. This is Hillary Clinton's closest aide, and it's not as if they can put her on the hot seat and sort of grill her. But their bigger right now sort of advantage is that Hillary Clinton's operation has built a real ground game in states like Florida and North Carolina, which they feel like they have to win, and now they need to sort of clarify the message to energize those people and get them out. And frankly, if they can't do it with Trump and fitness, Comey may be, in defending our girl, as Michelle Obama said, maybe really the hope they have.
Well, and of course they have a reasonably good case against the FBI director. We have people who served in Republican Justice Departments saying this is inappropriate what he's done. It's a violation of guidelines. But the Clinton campaign's problem is that the reason they're in this fix is because Hillary Clinton inexplicably chose to have a private email server as Secretary of State, and that Bill Clinton went to Loretta Lynch when their planes were intersecting on a tarmac and made it impossible for her to stop him, which she might otherwise have been able to do. If that meeting hadn't taken place, she would not have recused herself in such a thorough way from this investigation. And we know from news reports that she was opposed to what Comey.
And to that point, the race was you're already seeing signs of tightening in some of these battleground states and nationally before we had this FBI investigation, in part because, as I said, the spotlight was no longer on Donald Trump. The debates were in the rearview mirror. He hadn't gone on to Twitter to attack anybody in recent days. And the focus was on the Clinton Foundation and the Obamacare issue.
What did you make of the race tightening, Ben? Did you feel like that was...
I felt like that was real, but I felt like it was driven mostly by, to your last point, the news about Obamacare premiums, which affect so many people across the country. I think that that's the sort of thing that matters even more to voters than some of these email issues. But we have to keep in mind so many millions of people have already voted at this stage. Early voting starts so early this year that a lot of people have already cast their ballots, and it really remains to be seen whether that can make any difference on the presidential level. That being said, I do think it could be a situation where the final storylines of this campaign's days could lead the Republicans to do better when it comes to the Senate, as opposed to what a lot of expectations were.
Amy, in talking to some people in Trump land, that he's going to be in Michigan next week, New Mexico, Wisconsin. He's got other states to worry about. How do you read those trips, and what are they?
Well, what's really interesting about where we're seeing this map shake out in a place like North Carolina, which was a real push for the Democrats in 2012. Obviously, Obama didn't carry it after he carried it in 2008. She seems to be doing really well. Where she's struggling are in those Rust Belt states, or not struggling, but she's ahead, but not by the margins that Obama was. And so the challenge for Donald Trump has always been, if he's going to win this thing, he has to get into those so-called blue wall states where a Democrat hasn't lost in years and years and years, because he's going to lose a place like North Carolina, because he's not going to win. He could lose in a state like Florida, because Arizona's in play. You got to go to where the most opportune environment is, and that's with white working class voters. It may not work, but at this point, it's likely his only shot.
And it is a danger, though, because Kellyanne Conway, Donald Trump's campaign manager, she's a pollster, and I was talking to her last night, and she made the case that Michigan and New Mexico, that they'd seen some change in their numbers, some reason to give them hope. And I said, Kellyanne, don't you need to be on the air in states like Florida and Pennsylvania and in North Carolina in a bigger way where you really need to win? And she was like, well, Mr. Trump wants to go to these places. Mr. Trump's instincts, are still to try to win with the voters that Amy was just talking about. And it goes back to the danger that was at the beginning of this campaign, which is that you have an outsider who so believes in his own ability to win over people, and he goes to these rallies and he sees the way that the adulation, he thinks that he can win anywhere, and he needs to be focusing just on these states he's got to win.
All right, just a week left. Thanks to all of you. We'll be back in a moment with more of our interview with Vice President Joe Biden.